Hello, my name is Heikki Nousiainen. I'm a CTO and co-founder at Ivan, the trusted open source data platform for everyone. And today I'm joined by Max Pagel, a CTO co-founder at SensorFlow. And SensorFlow is a Singapore-based company combining wireless Internet of Things solutions and automation based on AI to make smart buildings a reality. Thank you so much, Max, for joining us today.
Hi, Heikki. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And today we'll discuss a bit on technology, a bit on sustainability, and the rising importance of AI, and how that maybe you share your experiences and insights on those topics. But before we dive in, maybe if you could share a little bit about your journey to become a startup founder and perhaps introduce SensorFlow in your own words.
Sure, happy to do so. My journey as a startup founder started in 2016 when I was sort of at university here in Singapore where I live. I was working as a research associate and was kind of getting a little bit frustrated with the science ecosystem and the way that all worked, and looked for new challenges and came across Entrepreneur First, which is an accelerator. That still had a format that suited me because I didn't really have an idea or anything yet, but I did kind of think that I wanted to do something, and their concept is to just throw people who want to start companies into a room with each other, and then you gotta sort of like find a co-founder and figure out what you each are good at, and then start a company doing that. That's sort of the first 6 months of it in a nutshell. And that's when I met my co-founder, and for a couple of meandering experiments and whatnot, we gravitated towards doing IoT for buildings. Because we both had an IoT background, and eventually figured out that hotels are a very underserved niche market in sort of building space that could very much benefit from specifically automation, because the usage in those buildings is very dynamic. So that's when we started SensorFlow as a sort of building automation company. What we do is that we install a whole sort of like a set of IoT sensors. Like, one of our strengths is that we've got a whole device family that we can adapt to the individual buildings, because one of the very early key learnings was that if you are in the retrofit market, which is where we are, you'll find very quickly that no two buildings are the same, and you have to be adaptable. So which is one of the strengths of IoT, because you can modularize, you have different devices that serve certain use cases. We sort of build out a whole family that allows us to very quickly retrofit into operating hotels, so they don't have to shut down operations, and install sensors in the rooms that detect whether the room is occupied, as in like a guest is inside, or where the doors or windows are open. And if we detect that the room is either empty or open, then we will change the air conditioning temperature to a higher temperature, or switch it off altogether, which then in turn saves energy, which is what we sell to the customer, which is the savings effectively. Then we use a whole bunch of analytics and AI on the back end from all the data to quantify how big our impact actually is, because that's one of the questions that you get asked all the time. How much did you save me? And especially in the context of air conditioning, which is a very dynamic electricity usage pattern, it's a very, very difficult question to answer. And that's sort of where I think our core IP is located.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And that combines kind of three areas that I also dearly love. So entrepreneurship, technology, obviously coming from a background, but sustainability, which is, I think, more and more important for everyone. Maybe kind of to take on there, given your expertise and given your field where you're working in, on maybe on how do you see the role of technology? How do you see these technology, IoT, AI, and the technology in general contributing to the global sustainability efforts, perhaps with and beyond SensorFlow?
Yeah, I think generally technology is usually an amplifier. I think it is sometimes a solution, but more often it's an amplifier. I don't think there is going to be that one piece of technology that is going to solve all of our climate change woes. That's just not how the world usually works. the world usually, even though a lot of entrepreneurs kind of like to make you believe that is the case and they're going to have the solution and this is a silver bullet and lo and behold, we're saved. But I think like progress is usually, especially lasting progress, is usually made through small incremental improvements. And I think that's where technology really is key. Just to look at what are we doing, where are the big contributors, and buildings are one big contributors, right? And then just continuously look at where are the inefficiencies and trying to make it better. And then just try to do more with less. And I think that's where technology shines, right? It's this that enables people to do more with less, or just to focus on the more valuable parts while automating the parts that are not that valuable. I think that's the core role of technology as far as I'm concerned. And there's many opportunities where you can find these little things where you can make a relatively big impact in a relatively small area, but it's going to be small incremental changes that's going to get us to the solution. There's not going to be one big bang that's going to solve all our sustainability challenges. I don't believe that's going to happen.
Yes, I tend to agree that maybe not one solution for all, but I love the combination of technology and the ability to optimize both, say, reduce waste, but that usually goes hand in hand in cost savings as well. So it's I'm hopeful that we can find solutions on that sustainability front. But maybe that's a bridge to, then obviously you are using AI and analytics for assessing the impacts and maybe doing the right choices on adjusting the temperatures. And I'm sure that you followed the rise of conversational and AI and generative AI models. And maybe a question on that area. How do you see, or how has generative AI, has it impacted your work yet? Or is there something that you envision that it will change, especially the industry where you're working on, or other sectors for that matters?
Certainly, definitely has it. I think AI is one of those, AI as people think about it nowadays, which is large language models and generative AI. So like the whole idea of AI has been around since linear regression, where people say, hey, machine learning. So I think there's different areas for it, and the devil is in the details. But I think that the recent advancements, which I think is what your question is mainly about, with regards to conversational AI models, are for the first time starting to unlock something that I was really hoping for. Like I sometimes call it conversational software in my head, which is something along the lines that rather than getting a product and having to read through manuals and educate yourself around how the product works and what it can do, and then have to memorize the nooks and crannies and all the intricacies that you need to know to leverage it in its best way. I would love to see a product that just effectively explains itself to me and picks me up and does all the things I need to do. I don't think we're quite there yet, and I haven't seen anything like that yet, but I do think we're on the verge of it, and we're going to see a shift towards sort of interacting with machines and software in a much more natural way. And I find that very exciting, because in my view, that dramatically lowers the barrier of entry for technology. Because one thing that we know from our experience as well, especially on a day-to-day, like we operate in buildings, hotels, and hotels have engineering teams, and traditionally hotels have relatively high churn of people. So we train a set of engineering teams that are there when we install the solution. Within 2, 3, 4, 6 months, half of them have left. There's new people with no idea how the system works. We either go retrain them all the time, but the institutional knowledge just drops. So having the opportunity to sort of like make these systems much more accessible in a shorter way, I think is where AI can help massively. And that effectively then enables more people to leverage the benefits of technology, as I've described before, to make things, to achieve more with less effectively. Because I think that training, that accessibility, not really understanding it, and then being dependent on good documentation, up-to-date documentation or other people to train you, if you can take that away and just have someone have an AI and just open the thing and it's like, I need to know the average humidity level in the worst humidity rooms, and then it will just give me that. It is a completely different story than being presented with a dashboard and bunch of menus and that kind of stuff that then just enables me to do what I need to do immediately rather than having to maintain that knowledge level all the time. And yeah, that's something that I find very exciting, that I look forward to, and something sort of like directions that I want to take our own platform as well.
Oh, thank you. Because that's providing access to more and more people. I think that's interesting and making just things easier to work. Maybe a little on one continuation. Are there any specific classes or problems you'd see significant change with the introduction of generative AI, or then vice versa? Maybe are there some areas that should be difficult to apply, or we should take care before applying? Any thoughts on?
I mean, it's going to impact a lot of areas massively, right? That's already happening, right? Like website optimization is already effectively, or content writing, right? But I think the interesting thing to me is that I think you'll find that you'll have it will generate a new class of a new class of quality in those certain services, right? Because it's technically any person without much training can all of a sudden be a content writer and write really good content, right? Any sort of text or whatever you need, AI can spit that out for you, and there's still enough people who have not really figured out how this all works that you can just resell ChatGPT output directly to people who have no idea about it, right? And it's good. It's often good enough. But I think there is also an interesting opportunity for some people who really want to take it to the next level, because there is like now a very sharp sort of thing where it's like, we still need people who are so different and so out of the box that they generate their own styles, because a lot of the stuff that AI is doing is trained on people who have done that, right? So if you have this brand, if you build that brand, and you can leverage AI to do this even better now. So I think there's going to be an interesting sort of shift where my prediction is that we're not going to see a complete replacement of certain industries that are going to be now done by machines, but it's going to level up the baseline quite significantly. So the barrier of entry goes lower. A lot of people come in, but a lot of people will be able to make much less money for it because there's going to be a lot more competition. But then you're going to see, I think, a new ecosystem of people who like really good, and they will brand themselves against the AI mud, for the lack of a better word, which is just all kind of generic. You can kind of see it, right? You have to get really good with ChatGPT to figure out to get it to produce content that is truly original and which don't sort of look at and say, this is a little bit suspicious. So it's, yeah, I think that's going to be interesting how that sort of goes and goes through society. But it's an interesting shift. Like everybody was like, oh yeah, watch out lawyers and watch out accountants, your jobs will go away. AI will take over your jobs. The true skill is creativity. And now the one skill that's going to disappear first or lose a lot of value first is creativity. So that's, I think, is the interesting thing. But again, in my head, like AI can help be creative faster. And it is great to sort of like spitball and get started and get to a certain point, but to really put a concept into reality and push it all the way through in a project, you still need a human to do that. So I think, I think that's where like certain, like if I was an artist and I had a very sort of defined style or these kind of things, I would go and train an AI specifically on my style. And that's something that only I have. And then I leverage that to just amplify my content creation game like crazy. And I can keep my specific style. I can just effectively commodify myself and make a lot of money from that. But in the first place, I need to still be that artist who has that particular style developed that is me. that no everybody will associate with me, right? So that in no way I can do that for you, because then you're into marketing and branding and all that kind of stuff. So it will amplify certain areas. It won't replace. It will replace some for sure. Some people will lose their jobs over it, but those are the people who are probably not that good at it in the first place.
It's interesting development and kind of it's so early days also in what are all the things that we can do with that one. I'm also very keen on let's say developer productivity as well, and that's something that Ivan also in parts tries to answer, and I'm kind of curious to see how far we can push these models to help development efforts as well. So, but we'll have to see. That's it's a very interesting topic to discuss, and then we'll see where we land in a few years' time.
It's definitely helpful to have it sort of run parallel when you're coding, for sure. I've been using that. Although I technically find it doesn't necessarily make me that much faster. It just makes it generally more fun, which is what I find. It's just because it feels like you're pair programming with someone a little bit, which is more fun than hacking by yourself. But yeah, I'm not necessarily sure it makes me that much faster.
Oh, it will be interesting definitely to follow all the trends and see how all the places we apply. Now maybe moving a bit forward. So Ivan obviously is a lot about open source and we open source is at our heart. So I want to pick your brain on a couple of topics related to that one. And on our view, open source communities have been a big catalyst for innovation. So maybe can you share your perspective on the say impact of open source collaboration, either with your journey or with SensorFlow or the industry in general?
I mean, open source had a massive impact on the computing industry for sure. I don't think we would have seen a growth of the internet as we saw it without open source, without the sort of democratizing of certain fundamental elements. And I think that's one of the biggest accomplishments of open source, that it has managed to democratize certain technologies and basically maintain that democratization, where you don't have privately owned companies controlling sort of like fundamental technology like Apache web servers or like Postgres, like database kind of things like that we have like an open competitor to the likes of Oracle. I think is incredibly valuable, and I would believe that made the world a better place. I find it interesting how what crystallized that eventually, if you have open source projects which need these kind of components, they become more and more corporate themselves, usually through some sort of organizations or umbrella like foundations, in a sort of non-private way. So in a way, it has given rise to a different corporate model, which I find very interesting. Right? It's like this open source, somewhat for profit, but not really for profit, but generally, arguably for the greater good kind of corporation. But you kind of need to still run it like you would run sort of a corporation, because otherwise you're not going to be able to consistently deliver a software product that satisfy the requirements that you do need for a specific production thing. Like you wouldn't really want to go and bet your production system on something that's been held together by a couple of kids in a basement and a couple of students at the university. So it's I think that's very sort of interesting, and definitely from an educational point of view, it's definitely been very good for many people to be able to look behind the scenes and read the code. Definitely has done a lot from an education point of view. I think that's my sort of the general take on open source. And it's just basically implemented manage to create standards in certain areas. I think that's and sort of encourage interoperability a bit more. So I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely, a little bit similar thoughts. So I always, with open source, gave me an opportunity to kind of in the beginning of my career to look into how things were built and why things were built in a such way and how things worked. So and definitely a good opportunity and benefit from learning from others. And maybe then a bridge to the community side. So one of the strengths of open source also has been the community and the kind of active sharing of best practices. So maybe how is the open source community in Singapore and Southeast Asia? Are you part in, say, joining meetups, conferences, or some interesting technologies coming that you can mention?
I wish I was. I don't really have much time to sort of do that myself because of like running a company. It's technically taking more like almost 100% of my time. What little I have left, I try to spend with my family. So that, yeah, I'm not too involved in the open source community in Singapore. Yeah, so I can't really tell you much about that here.
All right, maybe then moving on to, say, platform thinking. One area that is also close to Ivan mission on providing more than just solutions, but or single point solutions, with more of a platform in general. So, any thoughts, any kind of views on platform-based business and maybe the advantages and challenges in looking at platform approach in the technology sector?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's always like a chicken and egg problem. There was one article I read in some publication, I forgot which one it was, but the general message was that in the end, they were pitching I think Microsoft Office against Zoom or Slack, and the general gist of it was that what should you do as a startup, as a company, right? Should you be the best in class, or should you be the one that does everything? Which I think sort of brings us back to that platform thing. And the hypothesis of the article in the end, or the conclusion, was that the platform always wins. And you, however, if you are going for best in class, you will be very successful very quickly if you manage to become best in class. But you will not be successful in the long run because you cannot keep up. Eventually, you can only be best in class for so long. Eventually, the platforms will become good enough for you to not be best in class. We might still be best in class, but the margin is not big enough anymore. So your advantage will shrink over time, and you cannot always 10x in a certain niche consistently. So you will be caught up by the platforms, and the people will see more value around a solution that does everything in one product, rather than having to use several solutions to piece together what they need to do. There's another interesting book around that called Crossing the Chasm, which talks about how, especially in technology, you have the challenge that you have to observe that adopter model, which most people think is like a bell shape. You have the crazy people at the start, but there's only very few of them. Then you've got sort of visionaries, which is a couple more, and then eventually you enter the early and the late market majority, which is where you have the big share of the market. But the hypothesis of the book is that between those two, the visionaries and the early majority of the market, you have what is called the chasm, which is that gap that you need to cross, which most tech companies die in, because you can get most of the visionaries with a best-in-class product, but you can get very few of the early majority, which they call the pragmatists, with a best-in-class product, because they look for market standards, or people who at least have the potential to become a market standard. That one solution, that does it all. They don't want to deal with all that sorts many vendors. They don't want to piece together the product that they actually need by buying 10 different vendors and then having to like move between them all the time. And a lot of tech companies don't recognize that early enough. And then they are sort of inspired by the early success and the visionaries who are super excited about this thing that's now 10 times better than everything else. And then eventually find out that there's only so many visionaries that we can sell to. And it's interesting how you can see a lot of these platforms changing, right? So if you look at best in class solutions, there's like things that come up. It's like Zoom or Slack, which is this like one trick pony that came out. I'm the best messenger. I'm the best video communications tool. And what you find now is that sort of Slack is going in. So now we've got canvases where you can do mind mapping, and then there's potentially some task management coming in, and Zoom has now a messenger inside of it as well, and whiteboards and canvases, and like so now like Slack and Zoom are coming much more together now. So yeah, I think long story short is I do sort of subscribe to that idea that the platform will always win. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a platform, but you need to eventually find a platform that you can get your technology onto to ride with it. Because it is, for a small company, incredibly hard to build that platform out of nothingness unless you find strong partners. But then that brings you back to chicken and egg problem. Like, why would they want to work with you when you're small? So you kind of need a platform before you're ready for the platform, so to say. It's a tricky one, I would say. Unless you find a market where the needs are relatively small, to sort of get it through. But yeah, I mean, for Ivan, for example, it's one of those things where I'm like, it's great to set up infrastructure on your platform. It's great to sort of get it all up and running very quickly. That's fantastic. The monitoring stuff, that's where stuff gets a bit complicated. Like putting a proper observability stack on it and trying to sort of like get everything in order, observed and alerted and that kind of stuff. That software, I'm a bit like, yeah, it would be great if I even just had a button that says send me an email if my database goes down. But for that, I need to do this before I am in some point in the Grafana where I can then configure an alerting thing, right? And yeah, that will be one example where like you've done a lot in terms of platform already, which enables a lot of like platformy things, but then there's these things that are missing where I have to sort of plug my own into it.
Well, we'll sure make a note and make that easy. And by the way, I can recommend that book as well. I think it's a good, interesting read. Definitely worth the time. Maybe just a little continuation on the platform topic. Are there any now maybe capabilities that you are seeing that you need to add to your platform or your team, kind of while growing the company? That you would expect, or something that you follow out of interest that maybe at the point of a scale you'd be interested in looking into?
I think in terms of platform, the hospitality platform is not the hospitality platform. The hospitality industry is absolutely hungry for a platform that does it all. There used to be Oracle, who did Opera, which used to be the software solution that does it all, and used to be sort of the de facto standard for hospitality. But it's bloody expensive, and it's getting old. They're trying to desperately now roll out a cloud version to keep up with the sort of development, but this is sort of the state of hospitality, as I'm going to say. That industry, technology-wise, moves as fast as the assets that they are managing. So they are just sort of starting the transition to cloud operation for their properties and these kind of things. So it's probably a good like 5-10 years behind technology-wise of what sort of cutting edge would be at this point in time, which is an opportunity. But yeah, they're very much in that area where There's many different players who are trying to do that one platform that does it all. But for buildings, it's tricky because you have so many different areas, right? You've got finance, purchasing, asset management, property management, housekeeping management, staff management, engineering management, and trying staff communications. And I've probably forgot at least three areas and modules that you would need to satisfy to take over every sort of operational aspect of the building. Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge that industry has. They're kind of using several different platforms for it. Interestingly, a lot of them just use WhatsApp for communication internally, even if they have specialized solutions for it. So we're sort of in the middle of a platform war, I would say, in the hospitality industry to see who emerges, who does it right, and becomes the new standard. Might very well be that Oracle manages to claw it all back when they finally embrace cloud and sort of like create a good one, because it's the one that the people know of from back in the days. But it's certainly an interesting dynamic market from a platform point of view for sure. And a lot of people very sort of clinch together and don't want to share, like, we're going to be the platform, we're not going to let you onto it, and these kind of things. It's will be interesting. And also very fragmented across countries. A lot of small little local players. As what you would have had in the 90s or millennials, where you had smaller software companies developing like specialized software for individual properties. You still find that quite a lot in that industry. So it's an interesting one.
Thank you. That's actually going to lead to my last question for today, and a little bit I want to gauge on, because we see a lot of potential, a lot of digital native companies, a lot of startups coming from Southeast Asia and Singapore. So would want to pick your brain on that. On how do you see the say the technology sector in Singapore and Southeast Asia, and how it is to start a company in that region?
I would say it's probably a bit of a roller coaster, and it's changed dramatically over the past, I would say, 4 years. So in 2016, when we started, it was like Singapore is going to be Southeast Asia, Silicon Valley. Interest rates were cheap, money was ample, available, was everywhere. So it was. I'm exaggerating by far, but it's pretty hard not to get funded. So Singapore is a good place to start a company. Starting companies very easy here, and you can get off the ground relatively quickly. The challenge that you have predominantly in Singapore, I would say, is just the hiring and talent, because it is a very, very small market. There's only 5 million people in Singapore. It is getting more and more difficult to hire foreigners into Singapore. So, one of the challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges in Singapore is that you compete with all the big ones, right? We've got Google here, we've got Facebook here, we've got all the banks that you can imagine here with big headquarters and development teams. So from a hiring point of view, hiring local talent for startups is very, very tricky. You either have to pay way more than you can afford, if you're even able to find people that are willing to sort of work, especially in early stage startup conditions. So it's your best bet if you want to start a company in Singapore is probably to go distributed, which is what we have done eventually. Once COVID hit, we made a big change to sort of like distribute the company. We're now fully distributed across half of the world, I would say, from Europe all the way to Australia. So it feels to me personally, as sad as it is, that Singapore as a startup engine is way past its peak, and probably got fueled a bit too much too quick, and then cooled down way too quickly to sort of really sustain a proper ecosystem and culture of it. We had some really good momentum at the start. I think there was some interesting stuff, but since then, it's it seems to be a lot less dynamic in Singapore specifically. So I think you're probably better off, especially at the early days, to I would say that you potentially should still incorporate in Singapore, because it's one of those areas where people are like, investors like it if you are incorporated in Singapore, because there's a certain element of security and stability that they appreciate. But setting up shop overseas, especially at the start, might be a better option for you. It's just, especially if you're young and at the start of everything, you don't have that many funds and you want to really sort of like rough it out, I'd say just go Bali or Vietnam or Thailand, find yourself a cheap spot to live there with fast internet and start something from there. Philippines, we've got finding a lot of good people in the Philippines at the moment as well. So yeah, leverage the extended talent pool that you have in Southeast Asia. Is what I can, that would be my thoughts on this.
All right, thank you. So joining me today was Max Pagel, CTO and co-founder at SensorFlow. So thank you again for your time today and all the insights and experiences that you could share to us. And thank you everyone for listening in. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have a chat with you. Thank you.